Good evening, everyone. My name is Hunter Rohanian, and I'm the director of the Stonewall National Museum and Archives here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we're very happy to have all of you on this brief tour of the library and the archives. And I'm very happy to be doing this for the Boynton Beach Library here in June of 2021. I want to say hello to my friend Madison. Madison, come over here and say hi.
Hi.
Thank you, Madison, for your help, and thank you for having us here. We're very happy to have you.
Absolutely.
Here, so thank you. So everyone, welcome. This is, if we can bring the camera down this way, come on down and, actually bring it around from here so the camera comes around this way. I want people to see, here we go. So what you see behind us, and if you can back up this way, Madison, here we go. What you see is one of the largest LGBTQ libraries in the world. There are over 28,000 volumes here. It was started in 1973 by, I'm sorry that some of the light's not good, but it's still good. I'm going to keep talking. But it was started in 1973 by somebody in Hollywood, Florida, who was 18 years old at the time. And he had just a small bookshelf like this. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to start saving gay books because he knew that he was gay and his parents were very tolerant about it. Of course, there wasn't a lot of acceptance for gay people in South Florida at that time. It was, we're talking about 1973. I said the beaches in Fort Lauderdale were only integrated in 1965. So we're talking about a period in which stuff was very different. But anyway, this library has grown out of what Mark Silber actually did. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about the library. We have an archive with over 6 million pages, and we're going to go through 2 of the exhibitions that we have up right now in the archive. And if we have a little time at the end, I'm actually going to bring you for a tour of the archive as well, too. At the beginning, I'm going to say, please accept my apologies. The allergies are driving me crazy. And so I'm going to stop and take a little bit of water from time to time, but so that's why I sound so froggy like this right now. So for those of you who are in Boynton Beach or in Palm Beach County and you're interested, we're located at 1300 East Sunrise here in Fort Lauderdale. We're open Monday through Saturday, 11 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then 11 to 3 on Saturday. And of the 28,000 books that we have here, they can all be taken out. And we would give you a library card and you would be able to take out a book as well too. Now, if we turn the camera a little bit this way, I want folks just to take a look down here. And if you can see right back over there, see this bookcase where my hand is. So in those 2 bookcases back there, those are all books that have been donated to us that we find that we don't need. So one of the amazing things about this library is we have almost no acquisition budget. So the majority of our books come from individual donors. So if you have LGBTQ books and you would like to donate them to us, please stop by and we'll be happy to take them. What I find interesting is during COVID, so many people brought us books, and we're now at the point that I would say only 5% of the books that are donated to us, we don't have in the library. And that's sort of an amazing testament as to the breadth and depth of what we have for LGBTQ books here. But one of the things too is that if you or any member of your family or some young folks who would like to start their own LGBTQ library, they can buy these books for $1 a piece. And we also send them all over the United States in what we call LGBTQ library starter kits as well too. And so they're more than happy to come by and see any of those as well. And also on our website at stonewall-museum.org, you can actually see our whole card kit catalog, and you can see if we actually have a particular title in there as well. So that's everything about the library. We're in this building that was actually the main library for Fort Lauderdale. And it was built in the 1980s, and thankfully it's a hurricane proof, but we're here with ArtServe and a few other nonprofits in this building. We've been in here for 10 years, and without the space, it would be next to impossible for us to afford being here, because of course libraries are not money-making businesses. And so it's important, and we get lots of great support from different foundations and from the county and everybody else. else, but it's great to be able to be in this space. So we do exhibitions. We have two exhibition spaces here. One which is right here, which is the Hester Gallery. I'm going to talk about this first, and then around the corner in the Rosket Gallery, we'll go through that show as well too. So I've been here for about a year and a half, and I was just so blown away by what was in the archive, and I really wanted to be sure that the materials that were in the archive, and actually obviously in the library as well too, were available to the public, and so we wanted people to be able to see them. So all of our exhibitions now come directly out of our archives. And so we try to put some of the stuff on the wall. So the show we have up this summer is called Don't Ask, Do Tell. And it is the story of the relationship between US military and the LGBTQ community, going as far back as 1778. So Madison, if we can bring the camera down, and we're going to start right over here at 1778. And some of you history buffs out there may know the name of Frederick Ensland. And Ensland was a lieutenant with George Washington's army. He was brought in to actually help form the US military. But he was an openly gay man, which at the time was really not something that was done very much. And as a result, he was arrested by the new government for sodomy. He was put in prison, and he was excluded from the US military, even though he was brought here by Washington for the specific purpose of building our army. During the 1800s and the 19th century, most states in the United States had laws banning sexual relationship between members of the same sex, whether it was two men or two women. It was known as the crime of sodomy. I wasn't talking about a particular act, but it was simply the crime itself. And there wasn't a lot of speaking of it. You had the chance of being, if you were caught, you would be arrested, you could be imprisoned. There are no known deaths in the 18th century as a result of, in the mid-19th century as a result of a sodomy, but certainly you would be court-martialed. I'll bring you now, having gone through that period very fast, but I'll bring you to 1919. And here there was a very famous situation in Newport, Rhode Island, in which in 1919, a group of young sailors were having sex, and they were found to be having sex in the YMCA and the Art Club. And the assistant secretary of the Navy at the time, put them all on trial. They were court-martialed as a result of having sexual relations with each other. And it ended up that it was such a brouhaha because what the Navy had done, it actually put young men out to act as bait and entrap those gay individuals to have sex with them. And the press at the time was so upset. Of course, the acts were considered indecent for two men having sex, but it was considered so indecent that the fact that the Navy entrapped young sailors and put them out as bait, they were actually subject to a tremendous amount of public scrutiny and shame as a result of it. And the Assistant Secretary of the Navy who oversaw all of that was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who 6 years later went on to become president of the United States. Unfortunately, a number of those sailors did go to prison, and they served time in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at a prison there. I want to show you this lovely little piece here. This is from the New Yorker, and if we can just pull in just a tad closer. This is a 1937 cover of the New Yorker. I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but here you see two sailors with a very fond look at the two other sailors here. And what's astonishing about that is that this probably went over everybody's head except for those who were really aware of what was going on and the relationships between members of the military. I also want to just point out that, of course, in many of our exhibitions, we really try to bring in books into them as well. And so what's nice is people could come here and they see the different volumes that we have here, and that becomes part of the exhibition, and they can take them and we replace them with others as well. Of course, during the 1940s, there were many men who were involved in the service, men and women, and so here you see them together. And during this, because the U.S. forces were so involved in conducting a war, they weren't able to do as much court-martialing of those who were found to be gay at the time. And so they were given what's known as a blue discharge. And it was actually called a blue discharge simply because it was a blue piece of paper. And they didn't have the time to court-martial the people. They would just be discharged from the army as a result of it. But once the war was over, the war ended in 1945, the services were able to start putting those restrictions in place again and start court-martialing the people who were found to be gay. So this document is one of my favorite ones. It's a little bit painful to deal with, but of course it's an important document. Of course, you can't see it on the screen right now, but here we have a 2-page memorandum, which is written by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of the Air Force. It's dated October 11th, 1949. And here you see the government going back into the business of trying to stop homosexual behavior within the service. There were 3 separate classes that they found that they wanted to be dealt with that would be available for court-martial. The first one would be if it was some sort of rape or involuntary action between 2 members of the same sex. By the way, they're very clear in here. It's not about men or women, it's about both. And so whether they were lesbians or gay men, everybody would be subject to the same discipline. So one action would be a class 1 violation would be if it was forced upon somebody. Class 2 violation would be if they were with consenting adults, if they were doing it willingly between each other. And then the class 3 violation, which was also subject to court-martial. The class 3 violation was that the individual only exhibit, profess, or admit homosexual tendencies. You didn't even have to find somebody doing something. You just had to go under the assumption based upon the way they presented themselves to the world or whatever they admitted that they would be subject to a court-martial for the idea of being gay. This led in 1949, this happened in 1949, and this led 3 or 4 years later when Eisenhower was president to an executive order coming into place that actually forbade gay people from serving in any place in the government, not just the military. Now you could not be a member of any branch, or I'm sorry, any part of the service because of one of your because of your own sexual orientation. Some people might know, of course, of the Red Scare, but there was a major thing known as the Lavender Scare as well, too. And some people easily can argue that a lot of what the fight against communism in this country, at least within the government, was actually to rid the government of homosexuals as well, too. So we're going to talk about that order that Eisenhower signed a little bit further because it's going to show up later on in the timeline here. So when we move into the 50s and into the 60s, there were a lot of gay organizations that began, and there was a great organization that began in the late 1940s, which might actually be one of the first known LGBTQ organizations. And it was the veterans who were trying to get their veterans benefits back in if they had been discharged with discharge. But 2 of the big organizations was an organization known as the Daughter of Bilitis, and then the other one was the Mattachine Review. And they took a very strong stand about gays being banned from being in the military and about the idea that it was, they wanted to serve, they should serve, and they shouldn't be subjected to some of that earlier treatment that they were subjected to. That brought us through the 50s, and then of course the Vietnam War happened, but it came in conflict with what was happening with the cultural revolution at the time. Women's rights were very much a part of the situation. There was the hippie phase that was going on at the same time, and certainly the Black Panthers and other people were speaking about civil rights. There was a Civil Rights Act in 1964 as well as 1968. And of course, people were fighting for individual rights at the time. There were people who were fighting as much as they could, but it wasn't really until 1975 that a decorated officer by the name of Leonard Matlovich he came forward. He was the son of an Air Force sergeant. He had the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. and he fought in Vietnam, and he came out as an openly gay man. They began discharge proceedings against him. This is 1975. And then they presented him with a settlement that he could stay in the service as long as he would never commit a homosexual act, meaning that he would never be able to be in a relationship with a person. He thankfully turned that offer down, and he was discharged from the Air Force. He then turned around and sued the Air Force to get his pension back. And that lawsuit was settled out of court. He was paid a sum of money, which has never been disclosed. And unfortunately, he died in 1988 at the age of 45 of AIDS. And it was a very sad situation, obviously, to happen. So that brings us through the 70s and sort of pulls us in. And Jimmy Carter in the 70s said that he would sign legislation that would allow gays to serve in the military. And you can see where this is going, that there's building support, there's building acceptance of things that are happening here. Other people were coming out at the same time. And then in the 1980s, of course, Reagan became president. And when Reagan first became president in 1981, between the period of time that he was elected in 1980 and the time that he was sworn in, about 2 or 3 weeks before he was sworn in, the Department of Defense issued ruling 1332, which once again made it even more difficult for gay people to be in the military. There's no way that that ruling would have happened without Reagan, even though Reagan was not president at the time, Carter was, but they would not have put that in place. And so that ruling that happened in 1981 was just another version of what we saw earlier in 1949. They're continuing to bring that path forward. Then, so if that brings us from 89, go another 10 years. And in 1992, you have Bill Clinton running for president. And Mr. Clinton, when he ran for president, he said that he was going to allow gays to serve in the military. He was very clear about it. He didn't want any more discrimination, and he was going to end that fight. Unfortunately, he picked it as the very first issue that he was going to start with when he became the president. And basically all hell broke loose. It was the thing in which many people really believed that simply the government was not willing and was not prepared to go forward with. So he was elected in 92. He was sworn in the beginning of 1993. And here we have a full page ad from USA Today. And this is dated April 9th, 1993. And here we have the headline, "Allowing homosexuals in the armed forces would destroy the military." Now, what's more important to any American than our own military? And the idea that military people would say that the military would be destroyed. It would be the end, it would be losing the ultimate war by losing your armed forces. And whose picture is underneath that? Nobody other than Colin Powell, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And of course, this is off the heels of all of the recognition for the first Gulf War. And so here you have this amazing campaign of generals, and here you have members of the Senate who were putting all the pressure on Clinton not to honor his pledge to actually allow gay people to serve into the military. And this particular ad, not only were they claiming that homosexuals would destroy the military, but they also, this group called Concerned Women for America, they would actually pay for every American to send 3 telegrams to their US senator, but both of their US senators and their member of Congress, telling them how they wanted them to stop opening the doors to gays. Now, remember when we went back in the very early part of the timeline and we talked about Ensland going to jail, that was about morality. It was considered to be immoral to be in a same-sex relationship. And then in the 1940s, we saw that the excuse at that time was the fact that it was going to hurt national intelligence through the fact that they would be subject to blackmail by the communists. Now, neither one of those things really got a lot of traction. Now we have a whole new theory. Here, what the generals were saying, they argued that homosexuals were notoriously promiscuous, and that their presence alone would make straight sailors feel uncomfortable. So it's just the existence of people, the existence of gay people would make someone else feel uncomfortable. Therefore, they should not be allowed. Now let's just stop there for a moment and think about that. When we think about human rights, think about the idea that we won't let women do something because their existence will make men feel uncomfortable. What if we said we won't let blacks come into something because their presence makes someone feel uncomfortable? This is exactly the same thing that was going on with regard to the gay community. And of course, for many of us today, we view civil rights as being civil rights. And so it's really hard to see and to hear these defenses that we actually get, and we saw with homeless. But of course, the big compromise came out of those discussions, the fight between Clinton and the generals and everything that went on at that time. And that's where they came up with the compromise, this grand compromise called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Meaning that you could serve, but you just couldn't tell anybody about it. So you couldn't admit what your interests were. And so think about how insidious that is when we go back to that memorandum in 1944, where you could be discharged simply because your general, your commanding officer, thought that you were gay. Now they took that little piece out, but they allowed you to come, they stopped you from being able to come out and to be able to articulate who you are, who you loved, and what your life was all about. Clinton, of course, who ran on a notion of allowing gays in the military, was vilified by the gays. And of course, here's an article from the gay press from a serial called The Advocate. And here you see Clinton under the headline Betrayed. And here you see all these pictures of him with the Pinocchio nose on him here, because of course he was perceived to have been a liar. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was obviously an imperfect policy. It was definitely a compromise that had tried to deal with changing mores and values in the United States, and things had moved in a rapid period of time. And of course, the country was still going to war in a variety of different places at the time. But then we come to Obama. And during Obama's time, he did accept gays at many places. And actually, in this photograph, he's actually signing an executive order overturning the executive order that Eisenhower put in place that prohibited the federal government from hiring gays any place in the government. And of course, there were two great Supreme Court decisions, one that did away with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And then, of course, there was another Supreme Court decision which allowed gays to become married. And so here you now see there's all of this this sort of popular support. You have public support, you have legal support, and then you're electing the people to provide other support as well. There was a blip at the end of the Obama term, and then with the next president, everything was left in place except that president who came after Obama. He said that trans people could not serve in the military. And his excuse was about as specious as the other excuses. His excuse was that if somebody was trans, it automatically meant they would have to have reconstructive surgery, and therefore that would be too expensive. That is what his excuse was. And so he didn't want the VA paying for it. And so he excluded trans individuals from being in the military. And then the last piece that we have here is, of course, here's the current President Joe Biden, who on February 4th, he had only been president for 2 weeks at that time. Here he is reversing Trump's ban on banning trans individuals from serving in the military. So if we could sort of move the camera all the way back over here to this entire timeline. So as we look at this and we sort of think about the whole thing, when we start all the way back at the very end there, and we're back with George Washington at 1778, and then we end up over here at 2021, there is just a small sliver of time during the Obama years, and then where we are today, in which you can see that LGBTQ people have been given equal access to service in the military. Today, it's believed that there are 65,000 openly gay men and women who are proudly serving in the US military. And so we wanted to be able to use this exhibition to actually be a salute to those individuals, because they deserve the same rights like everybody else. And if they want to defend their nation, they should have a right to be able to do that. We also get to see how temporal these changes are. We get to see how just a change in an election, you don't even need Congress to make any changes. You can have executive orders to be able to make this. But the power truly does rest with the commander in chief of our armed forces and the relationship that it has to members of this country. So anyway, that is it in a nutshell what this exhibition's about. And so obviously, if we want the people to come by and see it and to be able to take a look. So let's go down, Madison, we'll go down to the other gallery. I'm going to grab some more water here. Come on. You're doing good.
Try not to hit anything.
So this is our second gallery here, of course. And so this is a smaller gallery. This is the Ross State Gallery. And so this exhibition is called Off Our Backs, Lesbian Feminist Periodicals from 1957 to 2000. And what's very interesting about looking at some of these exhibitions, and you can slowly pan around here and let people see some of them. We start here in the early years about forming communities. And so here you can see, bring the camera around, here you can see an early issue of the Ladder from 1857, publication called Sisters by and for gay women in 1973. Here is a 1986 publication of Broomstick. Excuse me, and here is a publication called Sisters United from 1981. Chrysalis, which was a poetry magazine for women. And then, this is Lavender Women, which was from Chicago. And these publications, what the curator of it, by the way, the curator of this show, her name is Megan Ken. She's the chief curator at the Hollywood Center for Arts and Culture. What Megan was looking for here was sort of talking about how women's publications were developing a community among themselves. So they were changing ideas, exchanging ideas and exchanging resources. And they were able to develop a community through a lot of these publications. If you go down a little bit further over here, you can look at the idea of politics. And so here you're looking at a publication called Off Our Backs. Here is, of course, the poet Audre Lorde, celebrating 20 years, a woman's news journal. And here you have an amazing story about defending Guatemalan women in the United States. And over here, you're looking at another version of gay individuals picketing and marching here as far as gay rights go as well, too. So this is the idea, excuse me, the idea that political engagement is very important, and how women can play a major role in that. And something that not only lesbians had to deal with two issues. They had to deal with the fact, of course, that they were gay and that it was an ostracized part, but also they had to deal with rampant sexism within the community as well, too. And even African-American women were, in many cases, were not accepted as equals by Black political organizations. Even straight up women's organizations and feminist organizations would not necessarily. National Organization for Women for many years was not open to lesbians being, and they were afraid that they were going to be adversely judged if they were out as lesbians in those publications. And the final piece here is really talking about identifying oppression and also to talking about sexual autonomy. Again, the culture was such that women were believed to be, they expected to be subservient to men, particularly from a sexual standpoint. And women, and particularly lesbian women, wanted to be able to break those bonds and to be able to have their own autonomy. So they would have a right and the ability to talk about their own sexual freedom in the same way that men had been doing it for centuries and centuries and centuries. So again, this is all available here for people to come and see it. And so let's see how the wireless works. And we'll bring people back here. And so this is the archive. And so we'll come here. Can you get past me? Just move the switch.
Squeeze on
through. So we'll come into the archive here. And we'll pause here. Let's just make sure we still have the signal. Excellent. You still have the signal?
Yep.
Oh, you're good. Great. So folks, this is what 6 million pages of LGBTQ history looks like. The archive is made primarily of materials from about 1950 to the present day. We certainly have some artifacts going to the late 19th century, some rare signed books by Oscar Wilde or Walt Whitman, some letters from Susan B. Anthony, but the majority, the vast majority of our collection is really 20th century and from the early part of the 20th century, or from the mid 20th century to the present day. And so this gives you a sense of the depth of, let me just open up this one for you, and you can sort of open up your camera there a little bit and just give your audience a chance to sort of look down some of these rows. And so, of course, these are all, many of them are from South Florida. And there was somebody who lived in Boca who collected many of these. And so when he passed away, they all came here to our archives. But we have people who donate stuff to us every day. And so here you're looking at, and it's just, it's the tyranny of the alphabet. You can go from GQ to the guide, to Guy magazine, and over here on the M's, it's just, it's from one name to the next. And so we just received a grant from the Mellon Foundation to begin digitizing a lot of the work in here. We have many people who come in here. We probably have 2 or 3 at any given time who are doing research about the LGBTQ community, either doing through the serials, or if we can sort of pan around over here as well too. These are our clipping files and our subject matter files. And so there are over 2,000 different topics here. And they can range from, just from the sublime to the ridiculous of every single aspect of LGBTQ life. Much of this material has come to us from either people who were gay pioneers here in South Florida, or actually any place in Florida, and then for a lot of people who have relocated here. When they moved from New York or Boston or Chicago or someplace else, they brought a lot of their papers and information here as well too. And so again, so the archive itself kind of falls into maybe 3 or 4 categories. We have serials, as you see here. We have archival files, subject matter. We have a lot of textiles as well too. We have pulp fiction, and then we also have a fine art collection as well too. So it's pretty broad, and the work of, as I said, gets used for study, and then also it gets used for exhibitions here, as well as different places throughout the United States. So as I said before, the exhibition is up, will be up all summer. The Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Our next exhibition off our backs is coming down in a few weeks. And the next exhibition after that is called Misinformation. And what that exhibition will look at, we have a huge collection of books that were published in the early 1980s that contain misinformation about the early days of the AIDS crisis and how AIDS was transmitted and could be cured. And so in that exhibition, we'll be looking about how that misinformation was actually spread through the gay community and through the public. In particular, we're looking at how it comes through publications. So again, the address for the website is stonewall-museum.org. My name's Hunter Ohanian, and I'm the director. I'm very happy to have all of you here. And please feel free to stop by or visit us at any time. Thank you. And thank you to Madison and our friends at the Boynton Beach Public Library. It's great to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And here, I'm going to get on camera real
Thank you.
fast. Whoop. So yes, thank you all for coming to our program. For anyone watching on Facebook, thank you for tuning in and celebrating Pride Month with us at the Boynton Beach City Library. We've never done something like this before, and so we're super excited and thankful that you guys are here and that you allowed us to share your story.
Thank you.
So,
thank you so much.
Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Adios.
Right.